Hey everybody, this is Nephi Cole from the Your Mountain Podcast. We're excited to share some upcoming information about a few new sponsors, but you'll have to wait for that. First, we want to say thank you to Vortex Optics, Gunworks, Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership, Federal Premium Ammunition, and Viking Tactics, who have been longtime supporters and strategic partners. We also need to say this. The opinions you hear on Your Mountain from individual hosts or guests do not necessarily represent those of Your Mountain, our sponsors, or other entities we're affiliated with professionally or otherwise. You've waited long enough. Go listen to the show.
There are millions of acres of opportunity out there. They belong to you. Every day, decisions are being made that affect your land, your water, your wildlife. You should know about them. This is Your Mountain. Hey everybody, welcome back for another episode of the Your Mountain Podcast. I'm your host, David Wilms. I've got just one of the three of us, well, I guess two of the three of us, because I am here. I also have Nephi Cole here today. Nephi, how are you doing? And by here, I mean, socially distanced at a safe place, so I don't actually have to see you in person.
Here is kind of a strange term now, isn't it? It's like when you say, oh yeah, we're here, it's very, like, here can be anywhere. It's like omniscient now. It's very... Yeah,
I know exactly where you are, though, because I recognize the things hanging on your wall in the background. Like your fifth place trophy in your adventure race from a couple years ago. Yeah.
The Sniper Adventure Challenge, by the way. Did I tell you about that time I got fifth place, Dave?
Yeah, I got it right, didn't I? It was fifth place.
It was fifth place.
You know what fifth place is, right?
Is it the fifth loser?
No, fourth loser. Somebody's got to win.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Just like to say that 35 other teams would have loved to have had that trophy.
I'm sure. Well, and I give you a hard time, but I know I probably wouldn't have been able to complete the course. Well, I take that back. I probably would have.
Yeah.
But we'll never know because I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, so you can imagine that.
Yeah, exactly. We do not have Mike McGrady today. And because he's not here, I think we can also make fun of him. I think it's still okay. It's fair game. And I could say, like, well, it doesn't really matter. He only says about 5 words an episode anyway.
Yeah, he's a workaholic.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like when he worked for the Attorney General, then when he was Deputy Attorney General, I could understand it because then it's like, there's a whole state that's depending on him to not screw up. But now I feel like he should screw up all the time.
And he probably will. I imagine he will. Yeah. So I got to tell you, I'm
he'll probably mess up all the time now.
I guarantee it. Once you leave state government, you have to be accountable you don't have to be accountable to the general public anymore.
Yeah, but now you can get fired.
Well, that's true. Hey, nobody wants to hear us talk about this stuff.
Okay. You're right.
Yeah, I am.
That's rare, but you're right.
No, I know. I heard you say I'm right, and I have it recorded now. So this is exciting. So what we're doing, we started this project. We started our podcast, and this sort of blows my mind as I was thinking about this as we were getting ready to record today. We started our podcast almost exactly 2 years ago. So we've been doing this now for about 2 years. We're almost 100 episodes in. And one of our first guests, in fact, I had to go back. I thought I couldn't remember exactly which episode, but one of our first guests, episode 4, was Jana Waller. And Jana's joining us again today. Welcome, Jana Waller.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited that you guys have just, really gotten the hang of the podcast thing. I've listened to so many of them, and I'm really excited to be back on and catch up with you both.
Oh, we're thrilled to have you. And for, not to rehash old ground, because obviously we want everybody to go back and listen to episode 4 where you spent all this time with us too.
Yeah.
But we're going to rehash a little bit of old ground here. So you're the host of Skull Bound TV on the Sportsman channel, correct?
Yep.
And
that is correct.
Season 9?
9. Yeah, it's been 9 years on the Sportsman's channel, and it's airing right now. I've always been Q1 too, so I air 6 months out of the year, January through June, and I've got the rest of this month and then June. And then I am switching up directions. It's still going to be pretty much the same show. I'm going to be hosting it. It's called Skull Bound Chronicles. And I am shifting gears off of network cable TV and I'm going digital. I'm going to carbontv.com. I just feel like, technology is changing. People are having less patience for half-hour showing, if you will. People want to watch their adventure TV quickly. They want, 5 to 10 minutes at the most episodes. They want to see where you are, what you're doing. Okay, let's have something next. They want to watch it when they want to watch it, whether it's, in the break room at work, or maybe their spouse is watching The Bachelor and they want to watch something else. They want to have that option. So I'm super excited. It's been a long time coming, but I'm excited to shift gears and take my show digitally because I just think it'll reach a lot more eyeballs. So that's going to be happening in July.
That's so describe a little bit about that, if you don't mind, and then we'll get into some other stuff. But yeah, you were talking about people wanting their content right now and they want it in smaller bits. They don't necessarily want a full 30-minute. What does that entail? I mean, how as a hunter who's limited by season dates and drawing tags and how do you satisfy that? That content desire? How are you able to pull that off?
It can be a little bit of a challenge, but most people kind of have their brains wrapped around that, we hunt in the fall. But really, I hunt almost every month I actually do hunt every month out of the year. I am a huge predator hunter, so that expands my seasons to all year round, especially if you're talking about coyote, wolf, mountain lion, bobcat. I'm a big game hunter primarily. I do a little bit of bird hunting, a little bit of pheasant, duck hunting, but primarily I'm a big game hunter. All fall, I'm chasing elk, whitetail, muley, antelope, bear. But in the winter, I'm chasing predators like mountain lion. And I live in the West. I live in Montana. So we have an over-the-counter mountain lion tag, over-the-counter bear tag, and then there's always coyote hunting, which ranchers truly appreciate. So I'm hunting all the time. So content, and I'm also fishing all the time. And you can do that every month of the year as well. It just depends on what you're fishing. So between all of that, I don't have any problem finding content. I'm outside more than inside, and it's going to be fun. I'm even actually going outside the normal realm of Skullbound TV, and I'm going to be filming some really unique interviews with people. Right now, you can look at the first season of Skull Bound Chronicles, which is basically highlights from the last decade. I chose 15 or 16 highlights of what I wanted to kind of test the platform, test Carbon TV, and see what the viewership was like and see what the business was like, the business side of having a TV show. And it just overwhelmingly was fantastic as far as the reach. I've got an interview up there with Johnny Arlee, who is a Native American Salish Kootenai who was in the movie Jeremiah Johnson. For a lot of outdoor folks know that movie. That's an interesting interview. This year coming up, I'm going to do some really unique veteran interviews whose stories I feel may be already documented in a great book or, other interviews, but I want my audience to see these amazing men and women that I get to hunt with. So I'm going to have a lot more creativity with Chronicles to be able to do not just hunts or fishing adventures, but interviews with extraordinary people as well. So I'm going to be releasing 10 brand new episodes starting in July. And then next year, 2021, I am contracted to do 12 brand new episodes. So I'm going to be working and rolling full time.
Well, that's it. You're living the dream. I'll tell you that. As Nephi and I both sit in our basements, looking at computer screens.
Yeah, we produce a podcast every week that nobody listens to, and we never get to hunt.
Well,
that's not true. I know that's not true.
Yeah, he's lying on both fronts, actually.
Yeah, I know. I don't know about the hunt front, but I know you got, because a lot of people are talking about your podcast. So
yeah, I appreciate that.
Good.
Yeah, it's a great mix, actually. I travel a lot. I listen to tons of podcasts, and I really like your mix because it's a mix of not just hunting stories or, gun related issues, but you tie in the politics and you tie in the the reverence of our public lands. And I just think it's exciting to be back on it, but I really love where you guys have grown in the last 2 years. It's pretty exciting.
Oh, well, we appreciate hearing that, obviously. And to be clear, Nephi, I've been hunting like 3 times in the past week. Yeah. So you may not be hunting, but I'm definitely getting up. I thought
Actually,
you couldn't do
Monday,
that. Yeah, you
Tuesday.
can't do that. Yeah, I'm like,
Monday,
you can't do that.
Tuesday.
It's Mother's Day.
I invited. Yeah, it is. We were planning this turkey hunt. We were so excited. This group was like, yeah, a bunch of guys, right? And then as I approached my wife about the date, and she informed me that it was Mother's Day, I quickly, and Dave was invited initially, right? And so we were like, oh, and then it ended. The plan ended very quickly when, yeah, it's
had to shift that a bit.
Yeah, my buddy. So going with Rourke, Dave knows Rourke. So Rourke and others. And the thing is, like, when Rourke's wife said no, there was no. It was no. So we're not going. So yeah, we're going.
I can't believe you were even contemplating it in the first place.
It was an accident.
I know
because
because you're not on top of life.
Well, I don't even know what day it is anymore. Do you?
No, I've lost track. I just know today it's windy.
I know turkey season. I know the turkey's open in general.
It
could be.
It's going strong. Jana, have you been out spring turkey hunting at all?
I haven't been out turkey hunting only because I have been spending most of the quarantine down in Utah, which I've been having a lot of fun out in the San Rafael Desert. We'll talk more about that, but I'm back in Montana. I've been back for a little bit. I am gearing up for bear season. So bear season is well underway here in the West. And I have so many friends who have seen more bears this year than ever before. So I am so excited to hit the mountains. I'm going to start Sunday, hunt all next week, see how it goes. It's crazy. Just because of this, I had a turkey hunt canceled. I usually do a backcountry wall tent turkey hunt with my buddies, Jason Matzinger and Willie Schmidt. We all have shows on the Sportsman's Channel. And unfortunately, just due to this lovely virus, we've had to postpone that till next year. But it's the first time we've missed that hunt in a long time. And it's depressing, but I feel really blessed to be where I'm at in this crazy, chaotic time that our country's never seen before. You just got to shift things around. I've had a few hunts canceled, but not a big deal. You just kind of figure out other things to do. In fact, tomorrow I'm spending the entire day filming a camping tips and tricks video that is going to replace one of my hunts. And I actually have been thinking about doing this video for years. So now it's just motivated me. It's given me, I'm just going to take this opportunity that I've got and do a really fun tips and tricks video of how to make your camping trip all the more fun for your wives, girlfriends, kids. It's just, it's going to be a lot of fun. You just have to shift gears, deal with what the cards you're given, and it'll be okay. I believe things are going to start getting back to normal here quite soon.
I sure hope you're right on the getting back to normal or some sort of new normal where we can still do everything that we're used to doing.
Right.
I know we have a lot of things that we want to cover about some of the stuff you've been doing in the outdoors, obviously. But I do have to, because this is, we do a lot of policy. We're pretty wonky. We do a lot of policy stuff on this, and you're not just out there hunting all the time. You're involved in some policy too. And when we first talked to you, you had just been appointed to the Hunting and Shooting Sports Conservation Council that was set up by then Secretary of the Interior, Ryan Zinke. And I know that council now has been meeting for a couple of years, and I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about that a little bit in your experience
have outlasted
working
the
with
Secretary
that.
of Interior.
Well, it's funny that you say that. We actually have a 4-hour conference call coming up here in about an hour. So we're just making it work. Usually we all fly into DC and have a full day business meeting. And I'll tell you what, it's such an honor to be part of the council. it's fascinating to me because I've always been involved on the conservation side of things. I work really closely with the National Wild Turkey Federation, the Mule Deer Foundation, Sportsman's Alliance, but I've never really been involved in the political side of things and how it all works. I mean, to put it simple, of how it all works. How do you get policies changed? How do you get even wording on a federal website changed if it has to do with hunting and shooting? Like simple things you think, aren't that big of a deal, take a lot of procedures and a lot of people to vote on things. And so, it's been really eye-opening to me. You know, I'm sitting around the table while I'm in DC with, of course, the head of Forest Service, the head of BLM, all the conservation groups are represented, and it's just fascinating to be a part of it. I'm really looking forward to hopefully getting on the council because new appointments are being, I believe next month. This is our last meeting for this specific council, and I'm hoping to get on the next council, but it's been great. It's been very eye-opening.
So what kind of work have you done? I know we talked a little bit about what it was intended to be a couple of years ago when we visited, but for folks that are listening that haven't heard about the Hunting and Shooting Sports Conservation Council before, what is it? What do how do you contribute to it, and what are some of the outcomes from it?
Yeah. To put it just simply in short, I'm an alternate. I haven't been able to go to every single meeting, but I did go 3 meetings ago. And then every time we've had a telephone conference, I'm invited as well. Everything from wording as far as public land wording. It's hard to get rules and, of course, regulations changed, but I'm trying to think of some examples off the top of my head. But here's a big thing we talk about all the time, and that is the branding of hunting. And it can be kind of funny to talk about that, but me with my public relations degree, we're all branding hunting, whether we are individual hunters on social media talking about hunting and fishing and trapping to our friends, or we are in the industry. There's a lot of industry folks on this council as well. We put hunting and a bunch of components on some federal websites that took a lot of processes and voting on. So it's funny procedurally how it all takes is someone will come up with an idea that this wording needs to be changed, or we need to put this icon of hunting on the not the Forest Service website, but other federal websites. And to get even something as simple like that takes a lot of votes, takes everybody to discuss it. And then we have to come back next meeting, discuss it again, vote again. And then those procedures start to take place. You guys know this is your world. It's not my world at all.
Dave's an attorney. He loves this world.
Yeah.
It's like a double whammy for me, being an attorney and a policy wonk. That's just process.
He's so excited right now.
That's my whole life.
As you're talking, he's like, his eyes are glazing over. He's
I'm just giddy. Yeah.
One of the meetings, the last meeting that I attended, one of the issues that's very big is the issue of CWD and how we are going to, find funding for studies, and what does this mean across the industry? And like any topic, it depends on which group you're talking to, right? Are you talking to outfitters? Because they're going to have an opinion. Are you talking to the average hunter? Well, the average hunter doesn't want limitations on our tags and doesn't want limitations on seasons. And then you've got scientists who see sometimes and biologists who see the bigger picture of what could happen with CWD across our country and closing borders and even hunting in other states and bringing those carcasses back across state lines. And it's really complicated and there's no easy answers. And if you ask 10 different interest groups, you're going to get 10 different opinions. So it can be quite challenging to discuss topics and figure out good game plans because everybody has a perspective or a point of view that they want listened to. But, that CWD was an issue that was on a lot of people's minds and hearts at the last meeting. It's just, there's so many topics out there, but it's kind of fun. I have to admit, it's a group that I just sort of sit back, soak it all in, listen a bit. And, it can be a bit over my head at times, especially talking policy, but I'm hoping to get back on the council and learn even more.
Well, so sorry, Nephi, if you mind, I've got one more question on this. So recently, I'm just curious because I know that it's set up to be an advisory council, advisory to, I'm assuming both the Fish and Wildlife Service, and the secretary, and probably some of the land management agencies as well.
Right.
One question I have is, we recently talked about on this podcast how the secretary signed put out for comment anyway, an expansion of hunting opportunities on national refuges around the country. And this is something that the secretary has to do every year.
Right.
It has to put out for comment where there will be opportunities to hunt and fish within the national refuge system. And that's required by federal law. But the expansion included something like 2.3 million acres of additional land. And I'm curious if that was part of your discussion and some of the recommendations or counsel that you offered to the secretary.
Yeah, I'm sure it was. That's exactly the kind of thing that we do talk about. But like I said, being an alternate, the last meeting that I was at, that was not brought up as one of the big points. But I'm sure I don't get to attend every meeting. And quite frankly, I think last year alone, I was gone over 200 days out of my house. I'm constantly on the road and filming and super busy. I don't get to keep up with all of the notes. But yeah, that's exactly the kind of thing that is discussed and wanting input from all the groups. And it's really a unique thing to get the heads of all these organizations together in one place. It can be quite of a challenge sometimes when a main person on the council isn't able to come. That's when we alternates get to go. And there's tourism. I represent the hunting industry. There's the Forest Service, like BLM, certain conservation groups, Pope and Young, Ag Department, a lot of people to give their input. But, I'm sure that was discussed. I have to say that it wasn't in the meeting that I was in recently, and then this whole coronavirus thing it should be interesting to see what today's topic is, or topics will be. But, it's just fun to be a part of it, but I'm learning as I go. Don't have a lot of answers, kind of just sitting back, letting it soak in.
Well, I was looking through the charter, and without giving away where Nephi or I work, which it's like the worst, best kept secret ever, I think. But our respective bosses are on that council as well.
And I bet that they go out to lunch afterwards.
Probably. Right.
Typically dinner before, but No,
I think you're a great advocate, and I think you sell yourself short a little bit when you're. Honestly, you do a fantastic job of explaining these things, and one of the things I appreciate about the way you interact with people is that you do it in such a way that's there's a lot of humility to it, and I think that average people appreciate it when you obviously understand the stuff, even though you act like you don't, and you're a great advocate for the hunting community, and so we appreciate it.
Well, I really appreciate that. I think I never want to come off like I'm heavy-handed, if you will. And I think it's because I have friends in every single sector, like we talked about. I have friends who are biologists who get rained upon with criticism by hunters, right? I mean, whether it's being the wolf biologist, or in Utah, one of the deer biologists who just got bombarded. Our herds are down. What are you going to do about it? I have friends who are biologists and scientists. I have friends who are outfitters. I consider myself just a hunter. I mean, I have a TV show, but I'm just a hunter. I would be doing this whether it was my career or not. And so, I have friends who, I just talked to my friend today who works at the Forest Service down in Hamilton. I have friends who actually work in every single sector, and we all have different viewpoints, opinions, and goals. And so I try to always remember not to seem heavy-handed and have a point of view that's my way or the highway. So I appreciate that comment. Thank you very much. I'm constantly learning and growing, and definitely have my areas of expertise. Like we were talking about before the podcast, I'm a techie idiot. I'm better suited in the mountains. And so I will do everything I can to help out with this council, as well as branding and communicating hunting in the way that people can understand that we're animal lovers. But I'm definitely best suited without technology, without people, with a weapon in my hand in the woods.
Thank you for not doing having your own podcast yet, because we might be like number 5 on somebody's listening list. And so if you jumped in there, we'd lose. Like we'd get kicked off. So I appreciate it very much.
You're very welcome. I highly doubt I'll ever have my own podcast.
So you said you've been in Utah a bunch recently, and I've been watching some of what you've been doing. And what have you been doing in Utah?
Oh my gosh, I've been having so much fun. I am a scrounger at heart, meaning since I was a kid, I was always outside looking in my neighbor's landscaping and their rocks for fossils and looking for, sheds and deer sign and you name it. I'm a rock hound. I love going and looking for arrowheads. Every single year I go to Florida looking for shark's teeth. I'm just a scrounger. So I was introduced to the San Rafael Desert, and I have been going for 3 things almost. I've been going fossil hunting, arrowhead hunting, and shark's teeth hunting in Utah, which little did I know, I knew people would be surprised and would not understand that. But little did I know the barrage of comments that I've been getting after going shark tooth hunting in Utah. And we can go deeper into it, but long story short, back in the Cretaceous period, the river systems in Utah actually held freshwater sharks, stingrays, sawfish. And if you know where to look, thanks to my friend Julie, if you know where, not Julie McQueen, that's my bestie friend, Julie Truman, if you know where to look, you will find an abundance of shark's teeth. And Julie also happens to be sort of an arrowhead expert and ammonites expert and expert in all these other things. But yeah, I have had a lot of fun searching the desert for goodies.
Yeah. I mean, it's, so my background, I was, of course, worked in natural resources for years for the NRCS. So I got to say, honestly, super, super, super cool. And I'm very impressed. As soon as you started talking about the Cretaceous, I was excited as Dave was when you started talking about policies. So, yeah, it's really cool. And a lot of people don't understand the history of, those shark's teeth. And you talk about history, that's the history of the West where we like to hunt and pre-laramide orogeny. So, literally millions and millions of years ago, people don't necessarily know that these basins that now we like to hunt in, were neritic shore environments and swamps and shallow lakes and things like that. We just kind of picture the world how it is today rather than how it was millions of years ago. And that's kind of the fun part. You start to see from those fossils, you start to see the very long history. And then one of the things that you mentioned that is really cool is you can start to see the closer in history with things like, arrowheads, with things like, sites. And Dave and I, we often, this is called, for people who don't know, it's called, when you look at something like an arrowhead, it's called a cultural resource. And so
right.
if you're talking with a federal agency, and this is important for hunters to understand, any of us that have spent a lot of time out there hunting, you're going to come across the teepee ring. You're going to come across a flake. You're going to come across an old cabin. And all those things are considered by the federal government. They're considered under law to be cultural resources. And there's some very unique laws about, what you can and can't, what you can and can't do when you're around those things. Yep.
Yes. Yeah. And I agree with that. I think that those laws need to be put in place because let's say someone finds on public land a historical site or spear tips and arrowheads. And as much as we'd all love to pick that up, I think it's better suited where hopefully someone can take those and preserve them. I mean, these are just amazing. I've been luckily on public land where I have reached down into the soil on what was a game trail. I went up because I went up onto this flat and I was looking for sheds. I was on an elk hunt and I'm like, that would be a good spot where elk would maybe bed and shed. I walk up there. I'm up on a game trail. I see a tip obsidian, which for people who don't know is that black, shiny glass looking material. I reached down and picked up a 4.5 inch fully beautifully preserved obsidian spear tip. And as my body was just shaking. I was so excited. It's the coolest thing I've ever found. And as I looked at it, you can't help but think, what hunter made this spear tip?
Yeah.
And most likely it was never shot at an animal because obsidian is very fragile and very sharp and would have broke. What did he do? Did it fall out of his satchel? Was he sitting there making it and got just about done and interrupted and left it there? I mean, who knows? But you're right. I think about the other, not the hands that forged that spear tip or that arrowhead. What did it look like? Was he sitting on this flat looking at buffalo or elk, or what was the story behind there? And, I have found skinners, and I have found, I think they're called metates in New Mexico, or, the half end of one where they ground the corn into the rock. And
yep.
I mean, just stuff like that just really, in my opinion, makes me appreciate the ease of how we live our lives today. I mean, let's face it, we're all a bunch of pansies we need a remote to find the remote, for crying out loud. It just makes me really connect with people. But I also think that the laws and regulations that are put in place are good, because stuff found on federal land, I think, needs to be preserved and then appreciated by so many more people than, one person who finds something cool and wants to take it home.
Yep. Well, and that's I know that, so I worked for the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and we did a lot of work on federal lands, and we did a lot of work on private lands. And so for people that don't know, that doesn't mean, if you're out there and you're looking, arrowhead hunting on private lands with permission is totally kosher. And,
right.
And so, but if you're out on federal lands and, you stumble across something like, a 8,000-year-old or 4,000 or whatever obsidian, 4-inch obsidian point. And somebody says, well, why can't you take that home? A lot of people don't understand. So the cultural resources, one of the things that's important to those things is context. And so, if when you pick something up and you take it out of where it was at, so let's say you took that spear point, and I know you didn't because we talked about this before, but if let's say you picked that spear point up off of that location where it was at, or, if, were you, anyway, like if you're on public lands and you pick something up like that, then you, even if you've got the spear point, you're not on the hill anymore. And so as a hunter, where we'd be like, oh yeah, well, we were on a hill, and so this is where somebody else was on that hill, and this is where they hunted. Well, that spear point may be in a museum, but if you haven't got it on the hill, then you've lost the understanding of the culture. You've lost the understanding of the tribe, of the person who was building it, why they were building it. And so it sounds boring and it sounds, tedious. But hey, that's why these federal agencies have an archaeologist who, if you tell them where it's at, they can go, catalog those things and make sure that that's considered. Yep. And on private lands, the same thing. The landowner, whoever, that history can be told, can be understood and put in place so that it can be preserved for the future, not just the artifact itself, but the context of that artifact. Yeah.
That's so fascinating. That's so fascinating. The older I get too, it's funny how we constantly in the hunting industry, everything's changing, right? Every year, all the bow companies got to come out with a new bow, and everybody's got to have something new to sell. Mm-hmm. And I hate that. Like, it's funny because I work for companies that do that, and that's just the nature of the beast. But I love to think back and to think of, for thousands and thousands of years, hunting didn't change a whole lot, and I think that's a neat concept to think about. I still laugh. Some of my equipment that I've been bow hunting almost 30 years. And one of my favorite bows was one of the first bows I ever bought. It might not have shot as fast as the new ones, but it worked. I mean, that first bow I have 4 beautiful whitetails on my wall thanks to that bow. So it clearly works.
You and Dave are kindred spirits.
Are we? Oh, yeah. I like to use old stuff.
Yes. That's all. I don't, it's not old. It's vintage.
A cultural resource is defined as something that's 50 years old or older.
So most of my hunting stuff.
Yeah. So most of Dave's stuff is literally an artifact. If he drops it now, there's some kind of federal law. The Antiquities Act prohibits somebody else from picking it up without calling an archaeologist first because it's so old.
It's like every episode Nephi has to razz me about my gear or my lack of gear.
And he tells me I spend too much money on gear every episode.
I was just say the reason that I have such great experiences and stories in like cheating death in places is, if he and I went out dressed in our gear and he had walked in my exact footsteps and had the exact same experience I did, but wearing his gear, he'd come back and say, that was a pretty uneventful trip. And I go out in my gear and I come back and I can tell this long story about how I almost died. And I just like to have the story to tell. So I have to have the old gear.
Yes. That's funny.
Yeah, well,
actually, Nephi, did I ever tell you, this is slightly off topic, but I got it. When you talk about old gear, old maps count too. My very first backpacking trip by myself when I went solo. Have I told you this? So
no.
My buddy and I, we were like 17, 18 years old, and we were going out solo for our first ever backpacking trip. And I didn't have any gear at all. So I used my grandpa's old like World War II knapsack. And it was like an external frame, right? And I loaded it up with like a 30-year-old canvas sleeping bag and all his mess kit from World War II. Like it was just like old school.
A German, and there was a German in there too.
And my buddies and I were trying to find a place. My buddy and I were like, okay, where are we going to go backpacking? And we were not going far from home, but we wanted to find some place. We didn't want to take a main trail. We wanted to get away from people. So I grabbed this map that my dad had in his basement, and we plotted out where we were going to go. We just looked at the Forest Service map and said, okay, this is a pretty big chunk of roadless area. It wasn't wilderness, but it was roadless. And we saw some streams and some beaver ponds on the map. And we're like, we'll go back in there. We'll set up camp and we'll fish. We hiked in the middle of the night, and it was, going through all these steep draws, kind of this nasty hike in, and we get set up. And the next morning we get up and we walk down to fish in the beaver pond, and we catch a glimpse of something shiny a couple 100 yards away across the beaver pond on the other side of this draw. And we're, what in the world is that? And we look at it a little closer, and it's a pickup truck, and a guy's there camped with his family right along this creek. And it turns out the map we were using was so old that the roads they weren't printed on the map yet. So we backpacked right into somebody's camp.
That's exactly why you need Onyx maps, updated digital. I'm not saying I don't like technology. I mean, I'm just not that great with it. I like old school hunting gear, but there are things I would not live without too. That's for darn sure. And the Onyx on my phone is one of them, or GPS. There's benefits to both. The GPS, the phone works anywhere, but you got to cache the map in. So you've got to, be very organized. If you know where you're going, cache that in. So then no matter what, if you don't have service, it works. But then a backup chip in your GPS is nice too, as long as it's charged. But yeah, I need to backpedal a little bit because I do use some technology, which makes me a better hunter. That's for darn sure.
Well, and just to be clear, that experience was, without saying how old I am, it was a while ago. There weren't these technologies didn't exist.
Right.
Everybody was hunting with a map and a compass.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So curiosity. So you're spending a lot of time like looking or just out hiking. What's the coolest, like when you are there any things when you're looking, at, and I know you've been on some cool ranches where folks are experts at finding cool stuff. Mm-hmm. Where do you look? Where do you find stuff? And then what are the things that you notice?
Are we talking arrowheads, spear tips, skinners kind of thing? Yeah. There's some basic guidelines that I think are, you want to, if you think what was their life like? Well, they needed to be by a water source. So whether it's a good size creek or river, I have often had a lot of luck on river bottoms set off from, flats by rivers that were, or a little bit of elevated areas where you could tell would have made a really good campsite, not too far walking distance to the river. That's definitely a plus. Water source for as far as my luck. Now, I'm definitely no expert in arrowheads or spear tips and especially not in, what tribes that would have come from or what era that came from. in no means. But another tip from one of my dad's friends is the largest carrot farmer in the Midwest. And Gary finds the coolest stuff every year after they till. So every year they till, and then after the first rain after a till is such a great, and he's got creeks and stuff, no rivers, but creeks and stuff, a lot of them running through his property that was maybe a great water source, hundreds of years ago. But he finds the coolest. They've uncovered 3 mastodons on his place. This is where there's lots of eskers and drumlins from the ice age that have come over his land. So he has, the coolest thing he ever found was a copper arrowhead. How cool is that?
Wow.
Yeah. But anyway, so tips and tricks would definitely be water sources, I think. And the fun thing about whether you're looking for shark's teeth in Florida or in the Utah desert or arrowheads is after a good torrential downpour or after snow has melted, you're going to be having a whole new search. Even if it's areas that you've searched before, after a good rain, that's a whole new playground.
Yeah, well, you said eskers and drumlins. You had me at eskers and drumlins. But a lot of people don't know that, like, that's one of the cool things. Like, people don't think about, the natural processes, what happens every year when stuff gets colder. When stuff freezes, just the natural actions of the soil, you have stuff that works its way up and stuff that works its way down, and the whole landscape changes, and you have a little bit of erosion. And you uncover things that weren't there before. And I know with NRCS, so when we were out, we'd go out and do cultural resource inventories, try and figure out, where stuff's at, and we'd catalog all that and everything. But I mean, you'd find, not just arrowheads, but like when you start looking on the landscape, when you start understanding where you're at, you can sit down like on one of those glassing knobs and you start to find what we call flakes. Whereas it's not an arrowhead, but you see a piece of rock and it's broken in a certain way, and that and you can find more and more of them, and you can just sit there and look at them. That somebody was sitting there working an arrowhead or working a spear point, getting those things ready to go. And to me, it's just such a cool thing of seeing that and knowing that, hey, you know what? Like hundreds of years ago, or maybe thousands of years ago, some other hunter was on this point too. And they were looking at these same things, and they were trying to do this. And so the more, as we think about our technology, and we may have a Gore-Tex jacket, but we're not so different than they were back then.
Yeah.
It's just really cool. Just really cool.
It's so cool. It's so cool to think about, especially, I think about what were the roles of men and women. It's so fun for me being a woman in the hunting industry and being like, definitely, I always laugh. I call it dude brained. I live for the outdoors. I live just to be outside, and I live for every aspect of the hunt, from the scouting and the preparation to during the hunt to, my dad always used to joke around, Jana doesn't field dress her animals, she autopsies them, because it's fascinating. I mean, what else do you get to see? Like, what was this elk eating? And, the webbing around their stomach, which is actually used. I know Ranella often uses that in his cooking. That's so cool. Like, I love every single aspect of it. And I often think back when I do find things like that, like flecks from an arrowhead or like old little chips of pottery in certain areas. You think back to like, what were the roles? Like, I don't even know. And honestly, I don't know. And the experts could feel free to reach out and school me a bit, but like, did the women make the pottery? Was that one of their, jobs? Did women ever make the hunting tools? I don't know, but did they ever hunt? Like, maybe, I know most of the time in like movies in Hollywood, which definitely is not the go-to for information. That's for darn sure. But, you see the women skinning and the women cleaning the hides, and it's just fascinating to me. I wonder if women hunted and what was it like and the different kinds of roles, and like it makes me think about when I find pieces of flecks of arrowheads, it makes me think about what a true celebration it was to have fresh meat. Like, what a wonderful thing that was. Even in the wagon trails, when, people were coming out to settle the West, they would send out scouts and they would send out hunters. And if you came back with even a rabbit, it was a glorious night to have fresh meat. and to be able to, get buffalo and deer and elk and all this other wild game or birds, or what a celebration that was. And I just think we just take so much for granted in the world that we live in today. And hunting is the one thing for me that really makes me just have so much gratitude.
It's also a motivator when you see, so in Wyoming, in Northwest Wyoming, there are two mountain ranges, the Wind River Range and the Absaroka Range, where the Shoshone Indians used to, there are actually artifacts up there at 10,000 feet or above 10,000 feet. They had settlements, seasonal settlements way up in these high alpine areas and over some unbelievably treacherous terrain, crossing the Continental Divide over the spine of the Wind Rivers. And I get up there and I'm exhausted and I'm packing through there and I'm exhausted and I'm like, struggling with the motivation to put one foot in front of the other. And then all you have to do is think about, okay, 200 years ago, 300, 500, you had these tribes that were walking these same paths, but not with my high quality boots. Right.
They didn't have Canatreks on. Yeah, exactly.
And it's another reason why it's so invaluable also to leave those artifacts where you find them on those public lands, because not just because the law says you need to, but to your point earlier, Jana, of how it tells this story. And if the artifacts weren't there and preserved and people able to put together this story, then I wouldn't be able to have that as a motivation to keep putting one foot in front of the other, knowing that people had walked that path and lived up there and survived off the land, at 10,000 feet for hundreds of years. Right. I mean, it's just a fascinating piece of our history.
Yeah. Yeah. The context you're right, is so important. And, it's funny when I always say what I want to do when I retire and have more time. Well, I'm certainly not going to change much from hunting and fishing, but I would love to. I've always, fantasized about being able to just go state to state to state and learn about what was it like hundreds of years ago? What did they fit? What did they hunt? What did they fish? Like, what tools did they use? What was this tribe like? Were they nomadic? How far did they travel? Where did they summer? Where did they winter? Like, it's so interesting. And I have to admit, I don't know a whole lot about Native American history. But I'd like to learn. And that's something that I look forward to when I have a little bit more time.
I don't suppose
let me pivot. Oh,
I was going to ask if you read the book, Undaunted Courage by Stephen Ambrose. It's about Lewis and Clark.
Well, this is so funny. Of course I have. And Stephen Ambrose was my dad's babysitter.
That is incredible.
I am. I'm totally serious. From Whitewater, Wisconsin. Yeah. I would assume you might have thought my dad was a little bit of a naughty boy, he and his two brothers and his sister, but no, Stephen Ambrose actually babysat my dad. And I actually met Stephen years back, one of his book signings in Whitewater. And actually it's the town, let's just say the town of Whitewater is very proud of Stephen Ambrose. And my dad is the one who turned me on to Undaunted Courage, as well as, I'm having a brain freeze. What's the story about the Transcontinental Railroad that he wrote? Very fascinating about just that whole process. But yeah, Undaunted Courage.
It's one of my favorite books. And I did not plan this. I had no idea. That is amazing.
Right. And again, to my point of, think about what they went through on their journey is unbelievable. In fact, I live in the Bitterroot Valley here, but, they were right here. They stood on the convergence of the Bitterroot River and the Clark Fork, wondering, which direction to take. And I also hunt right over the border. I'm an hour from not even from the Idaho border, in the wilderness there. That they called that some of the roughest terrain they've ever seen. And there's lots of little signs along the way over the pass where I live over into Idaho that talk about their journey. And again, just back to my point, we are pansies. We're a bunch of pansies today.
Yeah, those guys, I was thinking about this when you started talking about the tools that people used and kind of where they were at. And I was going to say, one of the things that I love, learning about them is you look at how tough it was when they came across. And so this idea that people have of, this romanticized, version of pioneering where everybody was eating giant steaks every night. And you realize these guys were starving to death, having to eat their horses. And also, made me think about it when you were talking about the Native Americans and what they did. And I'm sure that, as far as roles go, they did whatever they had to do to survive. Yeah. Some of those Native American camps and places where you go can find those artifacts and where archaeologists have, and this is one of the reasons it's so important to leave these things where they are, because an archaeologist will find something and then they will know based on what they found that they need to look for more things. And they'll find little communities and they'll find teepee rings and they'll find, fire sites. And some of these, when they get down to it, they would see where they had, gone through different levels of what kind of game they ate and how they ate that game, from eating the big cuts of meat down to where they would crush the bones down to as small as they possibly could to get every bit of the marrow out of the bones, because there was nothing else to eat. And those are the types of things that I find fascinating about the history of people. It's just super cool.
Yeah, I do too. And I think everybody needs to think about that, because what it does is just create a sense of gratitude. And I'm really into energy work. I believe everybody has energies about themselves. I believe in every living thing having an energy. I believe in everything happens for a reason, but also you have to be aware of people's energies and intentions. And I think everybody goes through rough times. I mean, I've just gone through a super transitional year this last year. But the one thing that helps anybody get through any tough time is a sense of gratitude. What can you look in your life at and go, you know what, this may stink right now, or this may suck, but I've got this, and this. It's always that sense of gratitude and putting that level of gratitude out into the universe that, to me, is the key to life. It really is. A sense of gratitude, I think, is the number one key to life. And nothing gives me that more than hunting. It really doesn't, in so many other aspects. It's so funny when I talk to non-hunters or city folk, or however you want to put that, they just don't, what they've seen hunting is what global Hollywood has put out there. And that's us with a big wad of tobacco in our lower lips shooting from the truck, whatever they want to portray us as. It's so not true. That hunters are animal lovers. We love the lands, the habitat, the herds, the flocks so much. And the more we immerse ourselves in it, I think the more grateful we are for our lives in every other piece of the puzzle. Our lives, we're so grateful for family that help us with tasks, whether it's laundry or cooking or cleaning or mowing or whatever. It's that sense of appreciation and gratitude for where our food comes from, the house that we live in, the shelter we have. It's the same. We all have the same sort of basic needs as people did 500 years ago. They're just different, and it's a lot easier. But when you can have that sense of gratitude, your life is so much better. And I can honestly say that I get that through hunting and this connection thing that we're talking about today.
Let me ask you a question. So you set up kind of what I wanted to pivot into perfectly right there. So unintentionally perfectly. The nerd in me has to mention, to wrap a bow around this cultural resources piece. We reference the federal laws, and just so people know, it's the Antiquities Act was the first one. The Archaeological Resources Protection Act of 1979 is really the one that is crystal clear, or crystallizes this idea that you can't remove these resources from public lands. Just for people's reference, the Archaeological Resources Protection Act. But now I want to pivot into what you set up, and you'd actually you're talking about your passion for hunting, and then you're talking about you'd mentioned something about city dwellers having a perception of the hunting community, right? Mm-hmm. And I want to ask you, so you have a role, kind of, I think of a dual role, and I'm curious what your take on it is. I view you as you're an entertainer and ambassador for the hunting community for other hunters. But at the same time, I wonder if you view yourself also as an ambassador for the hunting community to the 95% of Americans that don't hunt.
Absolutely. Oh, that's the key right there, I think. And it's sad to say it is the 95%ers when it used to be thought of as the 80. I remember 10 years ago talking to a lot of conservation groups, and how we boiled it down to make it super simple is this. 10% of us hunt. 10% of us are absolutely anti-hunting. And then there's the 80%ers who don't really have an opinion either way because they've never really thought about it and they just didn't grow up in a hunting life. Now you're right. It's less than 5% of us that hunt. And I have no idea what percentage is truly accurate to say are antis. And there's a group out there. In fact, they're actually labeled a terrorist group by the government, as you're probably well aware of. I get death threats all the time, as well as any other woman who's on social media, and guy, but women get targeted easier. But I don't know what group the antis are, the PETA people of the world. Let's just say they're 5%. But then you're right, that 90% or 95 of people that don't purchase hunting licenses. We're all constantly branding. I definitely feel as an ambassador to those people, because how else are they going to learn? Like, how else are they going to understand if we are not constantly having these open discussions and dialogues about what hunting is? Hunting is conservation. There are more animals and more birds in this country because of hunters. That is such a concept that is missed by people that we need to talk about. And I think it's important in every picture that we post, in every podcast we do, in every article that we are trying to not only, glorify the animal. And let's say he's so big, I'm staring at my moose on my wall right now that I'm proud of that hunt, and I memorialized that moose and it's on my living room wall. And yeah, he's a toad. He's amazingly big. It was an amazing hunt in Alaska, but it's so much more than that. And I think we need to talk about how that meat for 2 years was in my freezer feeding my friends and family, and how the strength I got doing that backcountry hunt. And as a woman, I find strength in every single hunt that I do. Pushing yourself over that mountain, pushing yourself through frigid temperatures, pushing yourself with, 70 pounds in your backpack, crawling out of the hills, pushing yourself in every way. And I think it's important that we are aware that non-hunters are watching what we do in every level, whether you are in the industry or you're just someone who loves to hunt or someone who wants to learn to hunt. Yeah, I definitely consider myself, as well as everybody, branders and ambassadors to hunting.
Yeah, we always say on this podcast that it's about 80% of the population supports hunting for food. There's a certain percentage that much smaller percentage that is anti-hunting, and then there's still some that are kind of agnostic about it, right? They don't support it. They're not really opposed to it. They're agnostic. And we've always taken the position as an extreme minority group in this country, as far as being hunters, right? That everybody else can make decisions that will affect us,
right,
negatively. And it's so important we want to recruit new hunters, obviously. But sometimes the most important thing isn't recruiting new hunters, but it's maintaining the support of the non-hunting community for hunting, so they don't regulate us out of existence.
Absolutely.
because they could do it tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so, so critical. And when I see hunters bashing other hunters on social media, it just makes me so upset, because they have no idea. Use that energy. Here I go back to energy. Use that energy and that passion to join the fight. Join the fight for the Sportsman's Alliance, for people who are trying to outlaw dogs in hunting, whether it's bird hunting or bear hunting. Join the alliance or a conservation group that are helping pay for the court battles to take our rights away. Don't bash other hunters. I can't stand it when and even to one weapon, I wouldn't, I don't believe in long range rifle hunting. I'm a trad hunter. We all need to band together, because you guys know better than anybody the forces that be that are trying to take away our passion for hunting, fishing, trapping, predator hunting, you name it. And that's a definite goal of mine. I'm very aware of the need for that. And I try to recruit everybody as much as I can. I do need to say though, that in trying to find the gratitude for this chaotic corona world we live in right now, I do think that I choose to be positive about it and think that it's going to be good for hunting and fishing and trapping. I think people are going to have a much more conscious awareness of where their food comes from and maybe look at us now in our sustainable lifestyle of, oh, they might look at it with different eyeballs because of this time that we're in right now. And I'm hoping people get into hunting that maybe have been on the fence about it and curious about it. But more so than anything, I want, like you said, that understanding of we are not trigger happy, bloodthirsty hunters. We are sustainable, land loving, animal loving people who want organic meat in our freezer and fresh air in our lungs.
I couldn't agree with you more. You know, the industry that I work in is that like we've seen a huge amount of people enter, you know, our circle of influence. And, you know, and we look at the hunting opportunity. What we see is like, okay, well, here's a group of people. Suddenly we have a bunch of people in society who maybe didn't care about the things that we care about. And suddenly we have an outreach opportunity. And I think hunting is the exact same way. People who didn't care before, who'd never thought about it, suddenly we have a huge outreach opportunity. And so for my plea to every hunter is this, you know, if they're like, oh, I'm not going to get everybody to change. You don't need to get everybody to change. We're at 5%, you know, if everybody just does one good piece of outreach over the next year, like how awesome would it be if we could get 2 out of every 100 people in the United States of America to think hunting is okay. We're asking for 2 out of every 100. We're not asking for everybody. And if you look at that, then we'll deal with 50%.
We already have 80 out of 100 thinking it's okay. You want 2 more. So hunting. You want 82 out of 100.
No, I want them hunting. I want them.
Oh, you want them actually hunting. 2 more.
I don't want them okay with Dave hunting. I want them hunting. And that's another interesting thing, right? It's tough for us because hunters are always like, oh yeah, we want everybody to be okay with hunting, but I don't want to have to share. Don't want to have to share my spot.
Yeah.
Exactly. We got to get over that.
Like totally. I tell you what, I went into the backcountry of Utah last year. We did a backpack trip in. We hiked in and spent 5 days in the backcountry. And I have to say it was a little more crowded than I was expecting. We probably saw in those 5 days 10 other hunters. But man, when I walked by those guys, did I get the old stink eye? What is she doing in here?
Yeah, right. You know, this is my spot.
Yeah, exactly. And
she's about to shoot your elk. Yeah. That's what she's doing in here.
Well, it was after mule deer, but yeah. It's just funny. Like, I get it though. I understand. I'm protective of my spots too. I really am. At the same time, we all have to be more aware of that and understand that if it means bringing someone else into our lifestyle or into the loop or giving up a little bit of open spaces, or you see other we need to be gracious to one another. We need to support one another. Maybe it's going to cause us to find other spots on our own that are less crowded. If you want to go into the backcountry and not see another soul, you know, get your Onyx map out and do a little bit digging. There's a lot of land out there. And, you know, while we were in there, I kept giggling after we'd walk by them and I'd get the stink eye. Like, dudes, there is so much country back in here. There is canyon after canyon after canyon after canyon. What we need to all remember is that we need people to purchase those licenses. So we have those dollars to go back into each state's wildlife management so we can better understand diseases and habitat and threats to our lifestyle. And it's just, I'm glad you guys brought that up. It's important. It's important that we all get new people involved, as well as, even if they're not going to get involved, just get supportive.
Yeah, totally agree. And to your earlier hypothesis, or hope for this, you know, after COVID, I think the data is already bearing it out in some states. There are at least some states in the West that are seeing a pretty significant uptick in applications for hunting licenses.
It's unfortunate this didn't happen right after the application period closed, right? Because that's the only bad part. It's like everybody,
timing wasn't the best. Yeah.
I mean, I know I was like, okay, every application in, you know, everything like I could apply for.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, application periods are still open in a lot of places.
Yeah. I made sure to apply for all the areas in Wyoming that I know Dave likes to go to. That was like,
actually,
decision.
he did do that on one. He did do that on one. He called me up to tell me, I'm doing a party application in your favorite unit. I'm like, you a-hole. I mean, that's
so funny.
Like, why would you do that? Just because I bring a big bull out of there every time I draw the tag? I don't need more competition on that.
Anyway. Usually I hunt general because I hunt with a lot of friends from out of state. And I was like, nah, this year, because in Wyoming, it's not preference points in Wyoming if you live in Wyoming. In Wyoming, if you live in Wyoming, it's just luck of the draw every time. And so if you never put in for it, you're never going to get it. Right. And so Dave puts in for this area all the time. And ever since he's been the assistant attorney general who's in charge of game and fish, he has this weird good luck streak that is unexplainable for drawing tags. And so I just decided that he needed worse odds. So I put
he needed some competition. Yeah. I'm so excited. So the one hunt, I know we have to wrap up soon. I just want to mention the one hunt I'm so excited about. You know that, I think we talked about it actually 2 years ago. One of my passions is getting combat veterans back into the great outdoors and to realize that like Mother Nature is so healing. And I've taken 5 or 6 amputees on their very first elk hunts. And, I've taken, from Bo Richenbeck was the first guy we ever took, was a double amputee Navy SEAL in Montana, to triple amputee Eric Galvin. Well, this year I'm taking Jonathan Blank. He's an amputee. I'm taking him to Wyoming. We're going to go back and look for a bull for Jonathan in last week of October, I think. Hopefully if we draw, but it looks like we should. And that we're going back to R&K, and it's going to be, those moments are my favorite of by far of all, even me notching my own tags, to watch these combat veterans who have, given limb and lives of their buddies, to come back to show them that, and Jonathan, he has no legs whatsoever, but he's really strong and built, and he can crawl a lot, and he's really, really athletic. And then we'll help him with, the buggies and stuff, get around a bit too. But to be able to watch him get up on his bull and, just wrap his hands around, the antlers of this beautiful, majestic bull and fill his own freezer. And it's a beautiful thing. So speaking of Wyoming, I sure hope to draw that again. It's going to be an amazing opportunity. And now that I'm able to go on Carbon TV, it's a link that can be shared and watched anytime. So you guys will definitely have to watch that one. I think you'll like it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah, for sure. I have one more question that we ask everybody. I don't know if we asked this question to you when you were on the first time. We didn't do it right out of the gates. We started asking. Before I ask that question, I want you to, if people want to follow you, see what you're up to, learn more about what you're doing, put a plug in for yourself here. Where do they go find you?
Right now they can find me on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter under Skull Bound TV. I think I'm going to change that because Skull Bound TV has been my show for 9 years. I'm now moving over to Carbon TV in July, and it's going to be Skull Bound Chronicles. So I believe, though, if they just type in Skull Bound, it's pretty easy to find me. I run my own social media. A lot of TV shows have marketing people who do that for them, but it's just me. They want to send me any personal messages or, it is so cute. I'm a skull artist. I bead and paint skulls, and that's why my show is called that. I get so many people sending me pictures of their beaded or painted skulls. It's so cute. And with this quarantine thing, I've encouraged artwork, and I have gotten dozens of pictures. It's so cute from people, adults and kids, beading and painting their skulls. So anyway, they can find me. If they Google Jana Waller or Skullbound TV is my handle on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, skullboundtv.com. as well as soon to be skullboundchronicles.com. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Horrible plug. Shameless advertising.
No, you got to do it. You got to do it. All right. So here's and we probably should have talked more about your artwork, although I think we talked about it a lot on the first time we had you on. So people that want to learn more about the beadwork on skulls that you do and the art you do with skulls, go back and listen to episode 4 of the Your Mountain podcast. See, we can plug too.
Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. And So this is how we typically end our podcast. We like to ask our guests what their mountain is. Right? And did we ask you this last time? I don't know if we did or not.
I don't maybe. Go ahead though.
So basically it's everybody has that place that, that's incredibly powerful and moving to them, right? It might be a place that they had as a kid that was, because of it, it's what got them into, being passionate about the outdoors and conservation and hunting, right? Or it could be something metaphorical. It is something that has great meaning. What's your mountain? What's Jana's mountain?
That's really, I don't know if I did answer that before. I'll have to go back and listen to my podcast as well. My mountain, this may sound corny, but my gut reaction to that question is my mountain is any mountain. As long as I'm in the great outdoors, I just feel myself. I feel more connected to who I am as a person. I feel real. I think that that as much as I think social media is a wonderful thing, it's the world I live in. It's how I market for all my partners. It's how I communicate, being my whole family lives in Wisconsin. I'm in Montana. Like, I love social media for that purpose. But I also, you can't help, because we're human beings and our brains are so complicated, of, who is Jana Waller? Who am I social media wise? I'm always trying to be as authentic as I can. But when you are in the mountains or in the woods by yourself, or even with a companion hunting, and you're just watching that crick, babble on, and you're feeling the breeze in your face, and you realize the world just continues with or without you, I'm always more connected to the gratitude energy that I talked about when I'm in the mountain. And it doesn't really matter where that mountain is. And quite frankly, my mountain is changing. Like, my whole world's changed in the last year of my life. I've taken a little bit different direction, and any mountain is, to me, that peaceful place. That being said, I do have so my one other place that I just keep feeling that I need to talk about is my dad's cabin. For the last 21 years, I have hunted with my dad at his cabin in Wisconsin. And we had a different cabin before that and had a lot of memories about 10 years before that at a different place. But this cabin in the woods, he just sold, which I'm actually ambivalent about. I'm happy for him that he sold it, because he doesn't get up there as much anymore. He's 78 years old. But I went there for one last 2-day gun hunt this last November. I am probably going to cry talking about this. I did a last minute trip planned. I still wasn't sure what my life looked like after Skull Bound, what I was going to do, but I wanted to have 2 more days with my dad and all of my hunting buddies. It's the quintessential Wisconsin deer camp, where the motto of the camp is nothing ruins a good deer camp like someone getting a deer down. It's the Friday night fish fry, the brandy Manhattans, that kind of place. And I was just so nostalgic flying back to Wisconsin for that weekend. Friday night, I went out, I checked my deer stand. I decided to go sit in a stand that I had hunted 20 years before. It was my first rifle stand I ever sat in. It was rickety, falling apart. It needed change. And it was just so metaphoric, and like, okay, one more weekend, stay strong, buddy. Don't tip over while I'm in you, kind of thing. Like, I had to check the stairs and make sure there was holes in the floor. There's a hole in the ceiling, just this old rickety stand. But I couldn't help but feel so much gratitude for what this piece of property and my father bringing hunting into my life, what it meant to me. Opening morning, sun comes up. It's cold. There's frost on my scope. Like, it's frost on the one rickety window that's still in the stand. And, I was just having so much gratitude and feeling like I felt like the woods were glowing. And I'll cut to the chase. This deer walked underneath my stand. I shot it. The most amazing whitetail of my entire life. Mind you, my dad has no food plots up there. There's no trail cameras. It's just a chunk of North Woods, right? He didn't even get up there to bow hunt one time this year. We just all get up there to have time together. I shot 169 2/8 monster whitetail buck, and it was glorious. And it was just what that buck represented to me. It was and I had no cameras with me. It was the first time in 10 years I haven't had a camera with me. It was just me appreciating the woods, appreciating my dad, appreciating this lifestyle. You'll have to go onto my Instagram and watch my highlights because it's really funny. I highlighted it in my story of my 2019 Wisconsin whitetail. But that cabin is my mountain. Or was. And even though it's no longer there, he just signed the paperwork last week. It's still always going to be a place that I'll never forget. I have so much gratitude for it. So much gratitude towards my dad. And even though that's no longer there, my mountain is shifting, and that's okay.
Yeah, but that'll always be your mountain. Mm-hmm. No, I really appreciate you sharing that story. That's why we ask the question. As for stories like that. That's such a cool story. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you want to get out there to people today?
No. I mean, for people who are stuck at home, whether you're listening to this if the chaos is calmed down a bit or you're listening to it right away, Carbon TV is my new platform I'm going on. It's all free. It's for anyone, anytime. It's like the YouTube for hunters, except it's not discretionary like YouTube is. It doesn't take your videos down, as people are aware of in this crazy time. It's all pro hunting, pro gun. Anyway, carbontv.com. Go check it out. I do have one season on there that's a bunch of highlights from the past decade called Skull Bound Chronicles. Season 2 launches at the end of July. And that being said, everybody just stay safe, get outdoors as much as you can. And everybody, in the hunting and fishing world, I just hope we all shift our gears a little bit, band stronger together, and just be supportive of one another.
Can't say it better. Jana, thank you so much for coming back on. We must not have been horrible if you gave us a second chance here. So we really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me back on. I look forward to our next chat down the road.
Oh, I can't wait. I envision a conversation after Skull Bound Chronicles gets underway, and can reflect on some of your experiences there. And when you get reappointed to the council out there, fingers crossed for that for you.
Thank you.
Would love to talk more.
I'm a little bit late for my council meeting. I better get going.
Yeah, we better do that. Yeah, we'll end this thing.
Thanks so much, guys.
Yeah, thanks for joining. And on behalf of Nephi Cole, we really appreciate you being here. And for everybody listening, remember that life is about experiences. So go have one.